Today we will be reading The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs. This week we'll be talking again about fact and opinion. So remember that a fact is something that can be proved true or false. So it's something that we can find in a book, we can Google it, we can prove it. It's right there in front of our eyes. An opinion is what someone believes or feels. So authors often use facts to back up or support their opinions. So an opinion is what we feel. I might say chocolate ice cream is the best type of ice cream. And you might say vanilla is the best kind of ice cream. So those are our opinions and what we feel, and we really can't prove that. Okay. So we'll be talking about that as we read today, the difference between facts and opinions. So what this story is mainly about is a fossil hunter named Mary Anning. So she is a famous fossil hunter that lived over 200 years ago. And fossils, we've talked about them briefly before, but we'll dig a little bit deeper into that this week. But let's read what it says about fossils on the Preview the Topic section. Sometimes parts of animals or plants that had lived long ago can be found today. These are called fossils. An animal bone is an example of a fossil. Fossils can be found all over the world. Scientists look for fossils to help them learn about the past. Some fossils are on display at museums. You will read about a girl and her dog who discovered fossils in The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs. Please make sure, if you can, to click on the links that I sent you today on Dojo. There is one video about fossils and another about Mary Anning, who, again, is the main character of this story. And she was a real little girl that lived over 200 years ago, and she was a fossil hunter. And she continued doing that throughout her life into adulthood. So fossils, you may even have some. Some of the kids I talked to this morning through our Google Meet showed me some of the fossils that they have. So fossils could be imprints, okay, in rock or stone of something that lived long ago. Maybe it was a dinosaur fossil. Maybe it was a fish fossil. Maybe it was a fossil of a plant. So any living thing that existed many years ago that is not alive today may have left their imprint in a fossil, in rock, or in the earth that we can dig up and we can recover, and we can see what that plant or animal may have looked like. So The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs is a biography. So a biography is about events in a real person's life. So in this case, this biography is about Mary Anning, and you can see a picture of her here with her dog many years ago. And usually a biography tells the events in real order. So it kind of talks about how she started and where she ended up. The author of this story is Shirley Ray Redmond, and it says about her, at her home in New Mexico, Shirley Ray Redmond begins her day by waking up early and watching the many birds that come to the feeders in her yard. Then she's ready to sit down and start writing. The illustrator, Stacy Chouette, says even as a child, Stacy Chouette wanted to be an artist or a writer. I was a dreamy kind of little kid who loved to make stuff up, she says. She has illustrated many books, including ones about pirates and trees. So, as we read, our question to be answering and thinking about is, how can you learn about animals that lived long ago? So, dinosaurs are not animals that we can study today because they don't exist anymore. But we know that they existed from finding fossils and finding bones and imprints that were left from them many, 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 many years ago. And we know that they existed. We can put the bones together and predict about how much they how large they were, how small they were. And we can even find information like, did they live in herds? Did they live by themselves? What types of things did they eat? Just by looking at their fossils. And here we go. Page 424. A long, long time ago, there was a little dog named Trey. He was black and white all over. He had friendly brown eyes and a very wiggly tail. Trey lived in England. Trey was a real dog, and this is an honestly true story about him. Trey loved two things most in the whole world. First, he loved Mary Anning. She was 12 years old and lived with her family in a small cottage near the beach in Lyme Regis. Secondly, Trey loved going with Mary to dig for fossils. And if you have a dog, you know that sometimes dogs like to dig. So this would be a very fun thing for a dog to do. Looking at the next page, you can see a picture of a fossil. Okay, so why do you think the author included a picture of a fossil? Well, you may not have ever seen a fossil before. Let's read. So what are fossils anyway? They are the remains of animals and plants that died a long time ago. When a leaf or bone gets pressed between layers of sea mud, it leaves an imprint. After many, many years, the mud hardens to rock. So they are at the seashore. So many of the fossils that they found were actually fossils of shells. And you can imagine why that must be, because where do shells come from? Right, they wash up onto the shore from the ocean. Trey and Mary knew that they would find their very best fossils high up on the cliffs around the beach. They climbed up there every day. Trey sniffed the rocks, sniff, sniff. He pawed the dirt, scratch, scratch. Mary used a small hammer and chisel. Tap, tap, tap. With these tools, Mary carefully cut fossils out of the cliff just as her father had shown her. Trey watched as she placed the fossils in her basket. Most of them looked like seashells. Mary and Trey sold them as souvenirs to the tourists that came by stagecoach to swim at the beach near their home. So be thinking as you're reading. Think about what questions you might have. What makes sense to you? What are you wondering about? So I wonder about Mary finding fossils. Where does she look? Is it hard to find? Are they all over the place? What tools might she use? So in order to find the answers, I'm going to keep reading and hopefully I'll find the answers to some of my questions. One day, Trey and Mary discovered some very large bones sticking out of the rocks. They were huge. Trey growled and tried to dig the bones out. Mary used her hands to brush away the loose dirt. Trey, we've discovered a monster, she declared. The bones were much too big for Trey and Mary to remove by themselves. I'll go for help, Mary said. You stay here, Trey. Trey barked loudly and sat down in front of the bones. He was a very good guard dog. Mary ran all the way back to town and asked some grown-ups to help her. Trey and I have found something really special in the cliff, she told them. Just wait and see. When the men saw the giant rib bones in the side of the cliff, they were amazed. What a beast, they cried. Look at those sharp teeth. Is it a crocodile? One man asked, or a stubby whale? We don't know what it is, Mary admitted, but we know it's something special, don't we, Trey? Trey yipped and wagged his tail. A rich man who lived nearby heard about the sea monster. He hurried to see it for himself. I'll buy it, he cried. I will give it to the British Museum in London. Do you know what it is? Mary asked. It is called ichthyosaur, the man told her. That means fish lizard, he explained. It's like a dinosaur with fins. Now, as we're reading, sorry about that, I want you to look at the pronunciation. We've talked about that before. Obviously, this word right here is really tricky to read. It might be a word you've never seen before. So what the author does is she splits it up and she puts it in parentheses and Do you see these capital letters right here? That means that we've stressed that, or we say it a little bit louder. We say ichthyosaur. Okay, and we give it more of a stress. That's the syllable that we stress, ichthyosaur. And that is going to help us read that word. Okay. So, why couldn't the adults figure out what those bones were and what they were from? Well, they existed so many years ago, no one had ever seen an ichthyosaur before. And remember, an ichthyosaur, we can ask ourselves, wait a minute, what in the world is that? We may have heard of that before if you are really into dinosaurs and you've read a lot of books about them. But back down here, the author explains it means fish lizard. So, what do you think Mary's opinion is on what she finds? Think about that for a minute. So, remember, she didn't know what it was. Okay, look over here. When they saw the giant rib bones in the side of the cliff, they were amazed. Okay, and Mary says, they found something really special in the cliff. So we know that she thinks this is pretty special. Someone else, maybe if they've found bones before, might think, well, it's not very special at all. I've found these things before. But Mary thinks that she's never found anything like this, that they are quite special. So that's an opinion. That's what she thinks. That's what she feels. And we can prove that because it's in the text and we know from what the author says. The amazing news spread about the gigantic fish lizard and the dog and the little girl who had found it. Soon, many strangers came to Lyme Regis where Mary and Trey lived. They all wanted to hunt for fossils too. The men wore tall top hats. The women wore frilly bonnets. They carried pretty umbrellas called parasols. Mary shook her head and smiled. She rubbed Trey's soft ears. They watched the strangers together. So, why did the strangers come? They heard about the dinosaur bones and they wanted to see it again, or they wanted to see it for themselves. They don't have the right tools, Mary whispered. They are wearing the wrong kind of shoes. Aren't they silly, Trey? Trey yipped and chased his tail. So, are these people that seem to come from this place? It doesn't seem so because they're dressed very fancy. Okay, and they certainly don't look like they're ready to dig in the dirt, do they? Curious scientists visited Lyme Regis too. One man came from the university in Oxford. His name was William Buckland. He went to the old carpenter's shop where Mary and Trey sold their fossils. Can you show me where you found your ichthyosaur, young lady? He asked politely. Do you think you could find the exact spot again? Trey can find it, right? He's a dog. He can sniff those things out in a heartbeat. And why do you think he wanted to see that exact spot? What did he think he might find? Maybe more bones? Together, Mary and Mr. Buckland followed the little dog across the beach and up to the cliffs. Trey sniffed the rocks. Sniff, sniff. He pawed the dirt. Scratch, scratch. Suddenly he yipped. Then he sat down. Mary pointed. It was the exact place where she had discovered the strange fish lizard. What an intelligent dog, Mr. Buckland declared. Trey wagged his tail. So why does Mr. Buckland think Trey is so intelligent? Well, he was able to sniff out that spot and find the exact place where those fossils were found. Trey and Mary continued to dig for fossils. They were very careful. Mary watched for falling rocks like her dad told her. Trey looked out for storms and high tides. Then one day they discovered another giant creature. Look, Trey, Mary cried. Is it a sea dragon? Trey sniffed the skeleton and snapped at it with his teeth. The creature had a long, long neck. Its backbones was like a humped turtle shell. Instead of feet and legs, it had 4 large paddles. But it wasn't a sea dragon. Mr. Buckland called it a plesiosaur. So once again, look at that pronunciation. Plesiosaur. Okay, so Mr. Buckland seems to know quite a bit about dinosaurs, doesn't he? One day, Trey and Mary, oops, that down here. Trey and Mary found that no one in England had ever found before, or found a fossil that no one in England had ever found before. This one had huge bony wings like a bat and a long, sharp jaw. Trey growled. It looks like a gigantic flying lizard, Mary declared. The scientists thought so too, and that's why they named it pterodactyl. That means lizard with wings. Over the years, Trey, Mary, and Mr. Buckland became good friends. They showed him where to find the best fossils in Lyme Regis. So, how does the photo on page 436 right here, how does that photo help you understand the creature that the author is describing? Can you see all those parts? Right? Can you see what looks kind of like the bat wings and long jaw? Kind of looks like a lizard. Mr. Buckland brought books about dinosaurs for Mary. He brought beef bones for Trey. Mary, with Trey on her lap, studied her books every day. When Trey's whiskers turned gray and Mary was all grown up, they still collected fossils and sold them in the old carpenter's shop. There were boxes and baskets filled with fossils on the floor and on the shelves. Some of the fossil creatures were so big they couldn't fit through the door. Sometimes children and tourists stopped in to buy fossils of ancient sand dollars or tiny fish in curly shells. Many scientists came to the shop to buy fossils too. They brought carts and wagons to haul away the really large ones. So, why did Mr. Buckland bring books about dinosaurs for Mary? So, remember, Mary started finding these bones when she was a small child. So, she didn't really know a whole lot about them. She just knew what she was finding. And he was able to help her identify them from giving her books that she could read about, and she could compare what she was finding in the soil. Okay, and she obviously had quite an interest in these creatures. Trey and Mary Anning became very famous. Today, if you go to the Natural History Museum in London, you can see the large fossils they discovered together. You can also see a famous painting of Mary holding her fossil basket, and Trey, the dog that dug for dinosaurs. So, why did Mary Anning become so famous? So, that is a picture right there of Mary Anning. Okay, it's a painting. Okay, remember she lived a couple hundred years ago. So they didn't have the technology that we have with video cameras and cameras to take lots of pictures. So an artist painted a picture of her so that we would know what she looked like, because she became very famous for all of the fossils that she discovered. So let's think about the author's purpose. Remember, the author's purpose is why the author writes this story. What do you think the author's purpose was for writing this story? Why do you think the author wrote this story? Well, I think fossils are pretty fascinating, and after talking to a few of you this morning, I know a lot of you are interested in fossils. And imagine if scientists did not find fossils of dinosaurs, we would never even knew they existed, because remember, they're not alive today, and the only evidence we have of dinosaurs is from the fossils that we have found over the years. Okay, so if you go to many museums around the world, you will see fossils of all kinds of things, and especially dinosaurs. And that is our story for this week. So remember to check out the other links and videos that I have included on the YouTube channel so that you can learn a little bit more about fossils. I've also included a really cool project that you can do with mom or dad's permission or one of your guardian's permission. It could get a little bit messy, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to be trying it, and we will talk about that together. So check out those links that I've posted in Dojo, and enjoy reading The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs.